the current discourse around artificial intelligence, including generative AI, something we will probably talk about, is absolutely full of panic, which is unnecessary, and perhaps it is a bit of a disservice because instead of focusing on things that are to be solved and some challenges ahead, we are just clearly falling into that Terminator narrative.
This week, we are talking all things AI. I know it's the hot topic of the year. There's certainly a bit of an AI race when it comes to not just the technology of it, the innovation of it, but also a lot of talk about who's going to be regulating it, and a bit of a race between the US, the EU, maybe even China. The interest in AI, as we know, has really exploded since ChatGPT was introduced back in November of 2022. We see that in Google search trends, everybody all of a sudden taking a huge interest in AI, but we're also getting a lot of messages of fear. Some of those messages are coming from the people that are actually leading the AI innovation, comparing the risk of human extinction caused by AI to societal scale risks like pandemics and nuclear war. The signatures on that statement include CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman. He's the one behind ChatGPT. The leaders of Google's DeepMind, Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei, and many other leading experts. So our guest today is Alexandra Pregalinska. She said that I could use the American pronunciation of her name, but her last name is actually pronounced
Przegalinska.
Thank you, Alexandra. Alexandra is the Senior Research Associate at Harvard on AI, robots, and the future of work. She has a PhD in Philosophy of Artificial Intelligence from the University of Warsaw. She's also the head of Human-Machine Interaction Research Center at Kosminski University in Warsaw. She's also going to tell us a little bit about her less conventional way of getting into AI from a professional level. So that's all part of the conversation. Let's get into it. Alexandra joining us now. Alexandra, it's so good to have you. You, I think, are just going to give us such a great perspective on the world of AI. Where are you joining us from today?
I am joining you from Warsaw, Poland, so from quite far away, and thank you so much for the invitation.
I'd love to get started with this conversation on how you got into AI in the first place. Tell me a little bit about your story.
Oh, that's an interesting story because actually myself and everybody on my team, we came to AI from other fields. So we are sort of DIY AI people, you could say. I was studying, I studied philosophy, and I just had one lecturer who was actually from a polytechnical school, from a technical university, and gave us a lecture about artificial intelligence from the philosophical perspective, how that's going to change humanity, challenge humanity, what are the questions that are interesting when you think about a future evolution of AI systems, and our boundaries as humans. And I think that triggered me to actually focus on that a little bit more. Then I did my PhD in philosophy, but it was already focused on the Turing test, which is very important in the context of bots and conversational assistants. So it was still kind of more theoretical, but I started programming at that time. And yeah, for the past 10 years or so, I've been just a practitioner of machine learning, data science, and artificial intelligence in general.
And you said that that's a pretty typical path, that everybody's coming from different backgrounds and getting into AI?
I think that is still the case because, a couple of years ago, there was no way to actually formally study artificial intelligence. I guess you could study parts of AI, for instance, if you took some courses in computer science, but those programs in artificial intelligence that are specifically focused on AI are fairly new. So most of my friends and colleagues, my peers have been studying cognitive science, computer science, statistics, also sociology, neuropsychology. So I guess many people from many different disciplines now form the AI community.
And I love the philosophy connection because philosophy is all about fundamental questions. And there are so many questions to be answered about how AI fits into all of our lives. What would you
Absolutely.
say are some of the emotions that we struggle with when we're reckoning with the AI development going on?
Mhm. Well, I think the most prevalent emotion is probably fear. When you
Mm.
think about it, the way the story of artificial intelligence is being told to us by pop culture, by media, by also movies that we like the
Mm-hmm.
Terminator. It is mostly really a story that is infused with fear, with a sense of threat, where artificial intelligence can reach a level where it figures out that it's also as smart as we are, or perhaps even smarter, and then becomes our enemy. And I think it's in many ways a story about our history, how we've struggled, and how there were so many conflicts and revolutions as we were moving forward as a civilization. And I do think that we kind of put many of these fears into AI because this is something we know. So this is definitely a very, I would say, important feeling or emotion that accompanies the development of artificial intelligence. But then also, I think, on the other hand, we are absolutely intrigued, right? It's an intriguing field. We don't have any other technology that is so close to us that can also communicate with us, have a perception of reality, see something, hear something, respond, make inferences, reason also. So I think in that way we are challenged by it, but we're also very interested and intrigued by it, and how it's going to evolve in the future is a very intriguing question here.
Well, and I have an interesting question about that too, because you talk about the fear and the concerns about, Terminator and Skynet. Do you think us as a society, we do a disservice because every time something interesting in AI comes up, we immediately go to the bad rather than the
Mm.
possible good?
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Well, yes, I absolutely agree with that. So I'm definitely on the, I hope, rational side here. So very often I would just say, hey, let's not panic. It's just a technology. AI is a statistical model. It's very good at what it does, and it can be very helpful to us. But nonetheless, it's just a tool. But there are many other experts also, people who are also prominent in the field who are clearly afraid of this technology. Maybe, the sense of fear is sort of natural. We've evolved that way to be a bit scared of innovation, and maybe it had some, solid foundation. Maybe it made sense to be afraid of something new because it prevented something bad from happening. So I
Mm-hmm.
think we've evolved with that attitude, and that's why it's so well often seen, I would say. But then again, it is true that the current discourse around artificial intelligence, including generative AI, something we will probably talk about,
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely full of panic, which is unnecessary, and perhaps it is a bit of a disservice because instead of focusing on things that are to be solved and some challenges ahead, we are just clearly falling into that Terminator narrative immediately, right? And that does not help us in kind of rational thinking and kind of planning, strategizing around this technology. So that I think is a problem.
Yeah, I think everybody from my mom to OpenAI Sam Altman is warning about these existential threats that AI could bring to society. I was just talking to my mom about this last night, and direct quote, she said that AI scares the shoot out of her. I'm not censoring her. That's actually what she said. But I tried to dig a little deeper and say, what is it specifically about AI that's scaring you so much? And she said that mostly what she's seeing are really negative examples out there about bad actors using AI. For example, voice scamming and trying to get people out of money by pretending to, say, mimic someone like my voice and calling up a loved one and demanding money. She said that the messaging out there felt really scary to her, and
Yeah.
she didn't know where the world was going to go from there. And then, that's someone who is in the baby boomer generation, really isn't going to interact too much with AI in her life. But then you take someone like Sam Altman, who's telling Congress kind of the same thing, that if this technology gets into the wrong hands, we do have reason to fear, and that's why people need to act on regulation.
Well, Sam Altman is obviously telling the Congress that we should all be scared, but then again, he's incubating GPT-5 as we speak. So this is, this is an interesting, I would say, collision, right? Of
What do you think
attitudes.
what do you think is the motivation there?
Well, I think that there is a sense, and that is common, and this is something that I also share, that this is a very powerful technology. This is a very disruptive technology, and it can be, like you said, misused. Voice cloning, deepfakes. I'm from Poland. I remember the first part of the war in Ukraine, and I remember deepfakes of President Zelensky spreading all over social media, and they were not so well done. So thankfully, we were sort of able to recognize immediately that this is just a deepfake. But let's think about a scenario where they are done very well and they can really disrupt the public sphere, I would say. So there are really, I think, reasons to be concerned and to be worried, and it is rational to voice them somehow, to say that we have a problem here. We have a couple of we have a probability that this will be used in a way that we don't really like, and I'm okay with that. And I think regulation is really something that is necessary. We will also have a regulation in Europe. It's called the AI Act, right? It's been drafted for the past 2 years, and sort of ChatGPT happened in the meantime. So now they have to redraft it a bit. But nonetheless, it's a regulation that looks at AI from the perspective of risk mainly, right? Where it says, okay, most of the applications of artificial intelligence that we have seen so far, we could call them a minimal risk, but there are others that are high risk. And there is also a way of using artificial intelligence that we would rather ban, right? Like social scoring, for instance, or surveillance systems of different kinds. So I do think that a discussion is needed. But there are many ways to lead this discussion, I think. And for me, the problem is that if you're spreading hysteria, really, and fear, and if somebody talks about the percentage of chances of AI kind of getting rid of humanity and says, oh, it's 17%, right? 17%. And I'm at the same time kind of creating this technology, then this to me seems really a bit strange, right? Either you say, okay, there is a chance that this technology will be misused, and this is the way I would like to address these concerns, or you're saying, well, it's ultimately the worst thing that can happen to humanity, and I just simply stop building it at all. And to me, just when I hear the latter being said from people who are actually most prominent players in the field of generative AI, I just feel that I don't really understand where that is going.
Yeah, and we've heard some of those lead players talking about several month pause in any kind of development, but I tend to agree with
Musk.
Right. It was.
Yeah, but he has a bit of a problem because Elon Musk is clearly involved in building artificial intelligence. He's been involved and he's been one of the first investors in OpenAI's ChatGPT, but now he's no longer, a part of that group. So I think maybe he has some regrets being left with Twitter instead of surfing this big AI wave. So that might be also, a reason why he wanted to ban it or at least stop it for some time, so that maybe he could try to build something on his own. I think he mentioned something called Truth GPT as an alternative to ChatGPT recently.
I wonder if that's a merger with Trump's Truth Social. No, we're not spreading any rumors here. It's interesting because you have been in AI for about a decade, so you have this perspective to see that when I looked at Google Trends and when people really started ramping up interest in AI, it really did come right when ChatGPT was released, even though people like you have been working in AI for a very long time. Is that what you saw, just this insane interest kind of come up overnight?
Yes, I think this is the most surprising thing because, I think artificial intelligence has been trending for the past 10 years or so. I've seen interest, right? Business clearly got interested in it. And, around 2010, we had that interesting collision of three factors. So we've had big data, new types of algorithms inspired by the human brain, so deep learning, neural networks, and then computational power, computational capacity. And that sort of built, these three pillars have built artificial intelligence as we know it today. So I've been seeing, over the course of those past 10 years, a lot of interest. Social media is a great example here. Obviously, various recommendation systems, your news feed, that is all built based on AI, weather forecasting, different types of applications of AI in the banking sector, in the health sector. We've seen that. But it is true that since November last year, everything has changed. And I think the reason for that is that ChatGPT, being, I think, in many ways sort of an emblem of this new paradigm in artificial intelligence, is just so accessible, right? So everybody can use it. Many of us use it for free. And also, instead of coding it, you just talk to it. And I think that is the main difference, the difference of the interface that is so accessible and so relatable in many ways. Everybody can use it in a very intuitive way. And I think this is the part of the revolution, this low code or no code approach to artificial intelligence, where you are actually interacting with a very complex system, while at the same time, this interaction seems like, it's like talking to a friend.
And you mentioned the fact that AI has been out there in algorithms and everything for quite some time. But I guess the question is generative AI really a game changer, or is it because of the accessibility that you mentioned? I mean, it's obviously very interesting. It's obviously very powerful. But the reality is it what's going to move AI forward, or is it just getting a lot of money because it's interesting and people understand a little bit more?
Well, I think I would agree with that because, we've had systems like ChatGPT. We've seen similar architectures since 2017. And funnily enough, Google was the first company to introduce such algorithms. At that time, it was not Bard, but it was BERT, a tribute to Bert from the Sesame Street. This is a real story. And that architecture already was kind of interesting, right? So we knew of it, and we knew that it is very good at statistically sort of figuring out how a sentence should end, a sentence that was started by humans. So just this completion, right? So the next word after this word should be this one, and that fits the whole sentence and the context. So that has been done, and many people, I think many of us did not even notice that in Gmail you had that function that a system would kind of give you small predictions of how to finish that sentence or your whole email, or perhaps what would be a good topic or subject of your email, taking into account what you've written. All of that was already based on transformers, so systems similar to ChatGPT. That's how we call them technically, transformers. And ever since 2017, we've seen them evolving, right? And OpenAI joined that race at some point, and then merged with Microsoft, and obviously used that big infrastructure of Microsoft to build something bigger, something that was really well fed with data. Obviously the GPT engine, and also add many more parameters to this model so that it could actually figure out what you mean when you say something to it, what you mean when you give it a task, right? And it's very good at intent detection, so figuring out what your motivation is when you want something from it. And then it can give you an adequate response. And I do think that, technologically, this is not a major breakthrough, but in terms of accessibility, it is. And that's why I think we just, we think of it as a revolution.
And you talked about this overnight interest since ChatGPT in November, and how there's been this legislation that's sitting around for years over in Europe. It seems like right now, all of this conversation has really been sparked over who's going to regulate AI, and this urgency behind that effort to regulate AI. Who do you think should be regulating something like this, though? I mean, you have to admit that politicians aren't really the most well-versed in the most groundbreaking technology.
That is correct. And we've seen that with, the social media and the hearings of Mark Zuckerberg in the Senate, right? That there was
Right.
a bit of a mismatch in terms of digital competences. I don't know how to call it, between the tech people and obviously, the politicians. But ultimately, I think it has to be a collective effort, right, of many different stakeholders, because this technology is not only about technology. It's not about IT people and how they're going to use it, but it's a technology that is very, very broad. It's a general purpose technology, you could even say, right? So it's the type of technology that will penetrate so many different professions, tasks, accountants, healthcare professionals, different people who are working in various organizations, in business, consultancy, wherever you really look, you will see AI, right? So in that way, I think it has to be a collective effort. I do regret a bit that this regulation happens this late, because actually, many people from the AI field have been calling for a regulation before ChatGPT and way before ChatGPT. And we knew already that there will be some problems because some of these systems are just not explainable. They're like black boxes. They're very difficult to understand, and yet we use them. We want them to make decisions about important things like giving someone a loan, right, in a bank or not, or declining. So we really need to understand what these systems are just doing. And that has been a problem way before ChatGPT. But now I am sort of glad that there's at least a debate. And I do hope that this time around, the politicians will come prepared, and that they will be better prepared for these types of discussions. They do have experts. They can talk to many people. I have to say that I've observed, what's been going on at the White House. There was a meeting, obviously, between Kamala Harris, I believe, and then many representatives of those companies that are building generative tools, generative AI. There has been a hearing at the Senate where one of the senators said that Sam Altman should tell everyone how to regulate AI. And I don't think it's necessarily the best way to go. I think it has to be, we need at least a couple of rounds of different consultations. Many companies have to be involved, but also NGOs, civil society, researchers who are not working perhaps in private companies, but also at universities. There are many people with good ideas, so it has to be a dialogue. And I just hope that this time around we will do a better job than we did with the social media.
What would be your goal with regulation? What's the end game to prevent bad actors? What is the goal here?
Well, ultimately, I do think that we have many different challenges, and some of them are more urgent than others. So, for instance, what you mentioned, actually both of you, deepfakes, manipulation, cloning, voice cloning. I have an avatar. I have my own deepfake, and it's so good that for me, it's even sometimes hard to figure out whether it's her speaking or myself. Really, that's so uncanny. So, but I obviously use it in a very transparent way. Others may not want to, right, if they have other intentions. So I think that this is the main challenge, transparency. I have to know that I'm dealing with AI. When I see something on social media, when something is being sent to me, I would need more transparency here. And I would need perhaps a way to detect that effectively, because the current detectors of content generated, for instance, with ChatGPT, do not reach even a level of 30% of accuracy, which is very, very low. So it's a very confusing moment. I represent the academia. I see how other lecturers, teachers, professors are struggling with that they cannot actually detect whether something has been produced with ChatGPT or not. Ultimately, it's not about banning, it's not about punishing, it's just about transparency and figuring out how to use these tools in a trustworthy way. And also to prevent those bad actors from entering the scene with their flood of deepfakes. So I think that is very, very important. And that's a challenge number one. Then challenge number two is obviously everything that has to do with jobs and the future of jobs, taking into account the automation that we are seeing. And I think this is more of a challenge than a threat, but our jobs will change, and some jobs will probably disappear because of artificial intelligence. And I do think that politicians have to look at that as well. And then there are those, futuristic stories, speculations about AI reaching some level of consciousness, becoming, our enemy, or just a sentient being that makes decisions on its own and has some will to do things or not to do them. And that, to me, is not something that we should be talking about right now.
I wanted to talk about a word that you used to describe your avatar, which was uncanny. I picked up on that, and I was hoping that you could explain for me this concept of the uncanny valley. I've heard you talk on it before, and I just thought it was a really fascinating look at where people should be designing AI versus where they should be steering away from. Can you talk to me about that?
Yes, sure. This is a concept that my team and I have been researching for the past couple of years, and it was mainly focused on building robots and how not to build them, really. So the uncanny valley is this concept that tells us that if something resembles a human being but not fully, then we are scared of it, right? So our probably very deeply enrooted biological response to something that looks like a human and is not a human, and we know that, is to just have this eerie sensation that this is not something we should be interacting with. So this is, something that we've known. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a robot called Sophia. It's, very, very popular on social media, and it gives you that sensation or effect of the uncanny valley that is just sort of very confusing to figure out whether you're really talking to something that is alive or not, and is it healthy or is it sick? What's going on with it? Why is the mimic so weird, right? So why are the eyes rolling so slowly? So it does resemble a human, but then again, it's not a human. So, and that is interesting because now in the era of deepfakes, and also in the context of, the fact that we are mostly interacting with the digital world, not necessarily with physical robots, this uncanny valley idea is very, very, I would say, problematic. And we do see avatars that look almost exactly like humans, where that immediate response of your body is just like acceptance, right? You're seeing something that looks like a human and it talks and it's all good. But then there's suddenly a glitch. And that glitch is that moment when you realize that this may not be a human. And who knows, maybe also in the future, where there will be more of such deepfakes, we will become very cautious, right? And afraid of interactions with others because it will be very hard to classify who is it that we're dealing with.
Yeah, that seems scary to me, to think that you're talking to a real person or seeing something from a real person, and then there is that little hint that it's not real, and you're second guessing what you can trust. And as you said, some of these faked generative images that are coming out now that are meant to manipulate markets, that are meant to manipulate elections, some of them are sloppy. And take a couple seconds and you can see, like the instance of the Pentagon explosion, which was faked, where you could look at the fence and see the inconsistencies in the image. But people will get better at that.
Probably. Now they already know how to remove 7, 8, or 9 fingers, right? Because that's something that AI is quite often producing. When you have an AI generated image, quite often when you look carefully at the hand, there are more fingers than we usually have, like not 5, but like more. So that is a clear indicator that this may be a deep fake. There are some professional tools to detect deep fakes. And what is funny is that they're also done using AI. So it's AI versus AI. And I believe there is a tool called Deepfakes by MIT. It's like open sourced and fully open and free to use. And, I don't think that any of us a couple of years ago that